A female CEO in a wheelchair sat alone at the wedding until a single dad asked, "Will you be my date? Will you be my date?" The voice was calm and gentle, like sunlight through leaves. Alina Whitmore looked up from her untouched glass of champagne. Her fingers tightened slightly around the armrest of her wheelchair. Her blue eyes locked onto the speaker. A man in a slightly wrinkled gray button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, jeans faded at the knees. His brown eyes held a kind of easy steadiness. No pity, no hesitation, just presence. She blinked. "I don't dance," she replied curtly. "I'm paralyzed." The words hung in the air. She expected backpedaling, an awkward apology. But the man only shrugged, his mouth lifting in a soft smile. "I didn't say you had to stand, to be my date." She didn't know what startled her more, the ease in his tone or the fact that he didn't look away. People always looked away. Next to him stood a little girl, maybe 3, in a lavender dress with ribbons tied into her curls. She held a cookie in one hand and a stuffed bunny in the other. Her big eyes were fixed on Elena, full of curiosity. Elena turned back toward the dance floor. Lights twinkled above the guests and soft music drifted through the evening air. The bride, once Elena's closest college friend, was laughing in her new husband's arms. Guests spun and swayed around them, full of joy. And Elena sat alone, the VIP seat, tucked behind a flower arch away from traffic. Her designer dress fit perfectly. Her lipstick was intact, but she felt like a ghost at someone else's celebration. Then, a gentle tug on her hand. "I'm Luna," the girl said seriously. "You can dance with me instead." Elena hesitated. "Sweetheart, Before she could finish, Luna reached up, laced their fingers, and raised their arms like a ballerina. With a giggle, she twirled underneath. Still holding Elena's hand, she grinned. "Now, it's your turn." Elena froze. For a moment, everything stilled. The music, the chatter, the weight in her chest. Kevin stepped forward, silent, patient. He gently placed his hand on the back of her chair and gave it the lightest turn. The wheelchair spun once, slow, easy, like a waltz in place. A laugh escaped Elena, soft, surprised, real. Luna clapped. "See? I knew you could do it." Elena looked down at their joined hands, then at her motionless legs, then back at Kevin, now crouched beside her. He wasn't crowding, just being there. Tears welled in her eyes. She started, then stopped, her throat tight. "You don't have to explain," Kevin said softly. "She doesn't ask questions. She just believes." Elena wiped the corner of her eye, trying not to smile, but it came anyway. "I don't usually do this," she said quietly. "I figured," he replied, glancing at the party. "You looked like you needed someone who didn't care how things are usually done." She let out a breath, deep, steadying. Looking at him now, the untucked shirt, the faded jeans, the worn sneakers, he was everything her old world wasn't. And yet, somehow, he felt like the only solid thing in the room. They watched Luna spin again, arms stretched like wings. "No one's asked me to dance since the accident," Elena said quietly. "Not once." Kevin's voice was steady. "Then maybe it's time someone did." Eleanor laughed again, softer, easier. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a symbol or a shadow. She felt seen. And in that moment, something shifted. Not because of pity, not because of grand gestures, but because someone, in a simple shirt and quiet voice, made her feel like she belonged again. If you believe that a small hand can lead a broken heart back into the light, hit that hype button, because this isn't just a story about a woman in a wheelchair. It is a story about being chosen in the moment you least expect it. And for Elena Whitmore, everything changed with one question. The morning after the wedding, Sunlight streamed through the small window of Kevin's kitchen, catching flecks of color on the page Luna was bent over. Her tongue poked out in concentration as she pressed her markers to the paper, filling in each line with bold, enthusiastic strokes. "Are you drawing the wedding?" Kevin asked, sipping his coffee. Luna nodded, but didn't look up. "No, I'm drawing us." Kevin set his mug down and leaned over the table. On the page, 3 stick figures stood side by side. One was clearly him. He recognized his glasses and messy brown hair. The second was Luna in her puffy lavender dress, and the third was Elena. The wheelchair was drawn in bright purple. Elena's yellow hair was long and neat. Luna had even given her a sparkly dress. "See?" Luna pointed proudly. "This is me, this is you, and this is Miss Elena, our new friend." Kevin smiled. It was simple, sweet, but it stirred something deep in his chest, something that felt a little like hope and a little like danger. Later that day, as he strapped Luna into her car seat, he hesitated, then pulled out his phone. He had her name, but not her number. He'd never been the type to push, and Elena hadn't exactly screamed open for connection, but there was something in her eyes last night, just a flicker, that had haunted him all morning. The kind of flicker that makes a man believe in second chances, even if he's only got one shot. He made a few calls. It didn't take long. She was a CEO after all, public enough to track down. He sent a text. Simple. Careful. "Hi, Elena, this is Kevin from the wedding last night. Luna made a drawing of you, and she's been asking when she'll see you again. Could I send it to you? And maybe buy you a coffee sometime, if that's not too forward." He hit send, then waited. Elena stared at her phone. The message glowed in her palm like something fragile and impossible. She had just returned to her apartment, a sleek, high-rise unit with floor-to-ceiling windows and perfect silence. The kind of place that was supposed to scream success. All it did now was echo. She glanced up. The white wall across from the entryway was still blank, the same wall she had once stood in front of with Mark, her fiancé, picking out where their wedding photos would go. That was 2 years ago. He flashed. Twisted metal. Screams. Rain on asphalt. Mark's hand slipping from hers in the wreckage. The quiet beeping of a hospital room. And finally, stillness. She had survived. He hadn't. And with his death came the others. Friends who stopped calling. Colleagues who didn't know what to say. Whispers at charity galas. Pity in every glance. She'd retreated, built walls, became sharper, colder, more efficient. She had reinvented herself, Elena Whitmore, the unstoppable, unshakable CEO who made investors sit straighter in meetings and never asked for help. But last night, someone hadn't seen the CEO or the wheelchair. They'd just seen her. Luna's voice echoed in her mind. "See, I knew you could do it." Elena's fingers hovered over the reply button. Then, almost before she realized it, she typed, "Hi, Kevin. I'd love to see Luna's drawing. And coffee sounds nice." She hit send. A beat later, another message came through. It was a photo, the drawing. 3 smiling stick figures under a sun that had a smiley face drawn inside it. A river, family, the title scribbled in Luna's loopy handwriting. Elena smiled. It wasn't polished or practiced. It simply happened, the kind of smile that tugged at corners long unused. She leaned back in her chair, looking up at the white wall again. And for the first time in 2 years, she didn't just see what was missing. She saw a possibility. "Hey, wait, hold on." The voice cut through the noise just as the light turned yellow. Car engines revved impatiently. Elena's hands scrambled at the wheels, her breath coming faster as her wheelchair stuck between 2 uneven slabs of pavement on the crosswalk. The front caster jammed. She was stuck. And traffic was moving. A horn blared. She froze. "Don't move," the voice shouted again. Then he was there, Kevin, sprinting. He darted through the traffic like instinct, one arm raised to halt an oncoming car, the other reaching for her handles. "I've got you," he said, gripping the chair firmly. "You're okay." Before she could respond, he tilted the chair back slightly and navigated the stuck wheel over the bump with practiced ease. Within seconds, they were on the sidewalk again, the chaos of horns and engines fading behind them. Elena sat there, chest rising and falling, embarrassment mixed with a strange kind of relief. Kevin bent down slightly, hands still on the chair. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said quietly. "Just surprised." He straightened up, smiling gently. "That makes two of us. I didn't think I'd see you again outside my daughter's artwork." She let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "Neither did I." They stood there, the silence not awkward, just full. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Listen, we were just on our way to get dinner. There's this little Thai place 2 blocks down. Want to join us? Luna would be over the moon." Elena hesitated. But Luna's drawing had been taped to her fridge for 2 days now. "Sure," she said. "Why not?" The restaurant was small, cozy, and painted in warm orange tones. Luna immediately pulled out a chair beside her own and insisted, "This is for Miss Elena." They ordered spring rolls, stir-fried noodles, and curry. Elena found herself listening more than speaking, and that surprised her. It had been a long time since silence felt safe. Kevin talked easily, but never to impress. He told her about his job designing inclusive playgrounds, the kind with wheelchair ramps and sensory walls. "I guess it started when Luna was born," he said. "I kept looking at the world through her eyes. She needed softness, so I tried to build some." She smiled gently. "You built more than that. She's wonderful." Kevin's expression shifted, fond, but a little wistful. "Her mom left when Luna was 1, said she wasn't cut out for it. I think she expected me to give up, trade the struggle for convenience." Elena looked at him carefully. "And you didn't?" "No, I just figured Luna deserved someone who stayed." He said it without bitterness, just fact. Elena's chest tightened. She looked down at her untouched tea. "I used to think people leaving was a sign I wasn't enough," she said quietly. Kevin didn't interrupt. She looked up, blinking fast. "Turns out, they just weren't built to stay." Their eyes met across the table. He didn't try to fill the silence. And maybe that was what made her keep going. "I haven't talked about any of this in a long time," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "You don't owe me the details." She swallowed. "But you still care?" He leaned in slightly. "Elena, you don't have to be strong to earn someone's respect. You survived something most people couldn't. That's more than enough reason for me to admire you." The words hit deeper than she expected, not because they were dramatic, but because they weren't. There was no pity in his eyes, no expectation, just quiet understanding. Her lips parted as if to speak, but nothing came. Her hands trembled slightly in her lap. And then, without warning, tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and slow, not because she was in pain, not because she felt broken, but because, for the first time, someone had seen the weight she carried and didn't ask her to prove it existed. Kevin didn't move, didn't panic. He just reached across the table, rested his hand gently over hers, and said nothing. And that was everything. The late afternoon sun filtered through the tree branches, casting a soft golden glow over the playground. It was unlike any Elena had ever seen. Ramps instead of stairs, swings with back support, textured panels for sensory play. Everything was built with intention. Inclusion wasn't a feature here, it was the foundation. Kevin stood beside her, hands in his pockets, watching Luna dart toward the climbing structure. "This one took 2 years to get approved," he said. "They said it wouldn't be cost-efficient." Elena glanced at him, eyebrows raised. "And? I built it anyway." She smiled. They moved toward a bench under a wide oak tree. Elena wheeled slowly, taking in the space. Children laughing, parents chatting, no stares, no awkward silences. Just play. "You made this possible," she said. Kevin looked over at her. "I just gave them what they deserved." She nodded, but her hands curled around the armrests of her chair. Her voice, when it came, was quieter. "I used to go to therapy, physical, twice a week, for 6 months after the accident." He didn't speak, just listened. "I tried, but the progress was so slow. My doctors didn't think I'd walk again. My fiancé left, friends stopped visiting. It got harder to believe in something no one else believed in." Kevin crouched beside her, one arm resting on the side of her chair. "Do you believe in it now?" "I don't know," she admitted. "It's easier not to hope." He tilted his head. "What if we made it simple? No pressure. Just 2 steps a day, with someone who won't let go." Elena looked at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. He stood and offered a hand. "Come on, let me show you something." They moved to a quiet corner of the park, where a rubber mat covered the ground and parallel bars stretched across a short distance. Kevin locked the brakes on her chair. "You trust me?" She hesitated, then nodded. He gently placed one arm around her back, guiding her hand to the bar. "All right," he said. "1 foot forward. That's all." Elena's muscles tensed. Her breath was shallow. "Luna," Kevin called, "we need a coach." The little girl came running, hands clapping. "Okay, 1, 2, 3, go!" Elena exhaled. Slowly, with effort, she shifted her right foot forward, then the left. 1 step, 2. Her knees trembled. Kevin held firm. "That's enough," he said. "You did it." She nodded, lips tight. Back in the chair, her breath came in short gasps. Luna beamed. "You're amazing." The next day, they returned. Then again the next. 2 steps, then 4. Luna counted with enthusiasm. Kevin never pushed too hard. He was there when she wobbled, when she wanted to quit. On the 5th day, Kevin stood behind her, one hand steady on her back. "Let's see how long you can stand," he said. "No walking, just breathe." Elena closed her eyes. Her fingers clenched the rail. 5 seconds. 8. Her legs quivered. 10, 12, 15. Then, too much, her knees gave, but Kevin caught her. He eased her into the chair, but her face was already buried in her hands. "Elena," he said softly, kneeling. She shook her head, but not from shame. When she looked up, her cheeks were wet. "I didn't think I could," she whispered. "I forgot what it felt like, to believe in myself." Kevin reached up, brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You didn't forget," he said. "You just needed someone to remind you." Elena leaned forward, rested her forehead against his shoulder, and for a long moment he held her. No fanfare, no applause. Just steady, unwavering support. Above them, Luna's voice rang out from the monkey bars. "Daddy, look, I can do it by myself." Elena smiled through her tears. "So can I," she whispered. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, polished marble floors, and silver-trimmed linens. Waiters in black vests moved like shadows between tall glasses of champagne and practiced laughter. Elena moved with poise, her golden hair in a sleek bun, a navy gown tailored perfectly to her seated frame. Her eyes searched. There. Kevin stood at the edge of the room, holding a glass of water, stiff in a charcoal suit that didn't quite fit the designer setting. His tie was crooked, his gaze filled with both admiration and an unspoken question. "Do I belong here?" She rolled to him and took his hand without hesitation. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I've built jungle gyms for toddlers that feel less intimidating than this place," he replied with a wry smile. For a while things felt steady. Then came the whispers. Elena's date, is he staff? No, I heard he's a construction guy. Single dad, I think. Can't believe she brought him here. The sharpest came during dinner from Madison, a slick investment director with a polished smile. I didn't know you were dating, Madison said sweetly. So refreshing to see a CEO open-minded enough to date someone. Grounded. Kevin stiffened. Elena's fork paused. It's lovely, really, Madison continued. You could use someone, normal, humble. Kevin stood. I'm going to get some air. Elena was after him in seconds, weaving between couture dresses and champagne flutes, slipping through the French doors into the cool night. Kevin, she called. He was halfway down the stone steps. Please don't walk away. He turned, jaw tight. I didn't want to make a scene. You didn't. That's the problem. I am the scene. I don't fit here. They look at me like I wandered in off the street, like I'm something you'll regret tomorrow. She wheeled closer. That's not true. I build playgrounds. You build empires. You build places where kids like Luna feel safe. You built a space where I felt safe. He looked away. I saw your face when Madison spoke. She flinched. I froze, not from shame, from exhaustion. I've spent my life proving I belong in that room. When they mocked you, it felt like they mocked me for choosing real over expected. Kevin's eyes softened slightly. She caught his hand. I was scared, she said, that if I defended us, you'd think I believed you needed defending. He looked down at their joined hands. I don't need defending, he said. I need honesty. Her eyes shone. Then here it is. I'm scared. Scared that if I claim you, I'll lose you when things get hard. But if I stay quiet, I feel like I'm back on the sidelines of my own life. And I can't go back there. I won't. Her breath shook. I've spent 2 years hiding behind strength, but tonight, I'm asking you to stay, not because I'm strong, but because I'm finally brave enough to be afraid, and still choose you. Silence stretched, the breeze rustling ivy along the stone railing. Then Kevin stepped forward. He crouched, touched her cheek. You don't have to choose between their world and mine, he said. But I won't walk beside you in silence, not when you mean everything to me. Her voice broke. I'm sorry. He smiled softly. I just needed to hear that. What? She leaned forward, forehead against his. For the first time that night, she wasn't a CEO or a woman in a wheelchair. She was just Elena, with the man who saw her, and this time, she wasn't letting go. Elena stared at the screen. The blog post was everywhere, reposted, retweeted, reshared, under headlines dripping with accusation. Billionaire CEO fakes paralysis for sympathy. Attached were old photos of her standing, taken before the accident, and a short, grainy video someone had recorded last week at the playground, showing Kevin helping her balance for a few seconds. No context, no explanation, just 15 seconds of shaky footage and 1,000 assumptions. The blogger, someone she barely remembered meeting at a tech mixer last year, accused her of using her disability to rebrand her image after a year of declining profits. The article called her manipulative, calculated, and a master of emotional marketing. Herscher, the blogger's most famous article. She closed the laptop. Her hands trembled. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting. By 5, they'd placed her on temporary leave, pending review. That night, the apartment was silent. She didn't respond to messages. She didn't check emails. She sat in the dark with only the city lights flickering across the ceiling and the soft hum of the wine cooler in the kitchen. Kevin called. She ignored it. Then came the knock. It was gentle, hesitant. She knew it would be him, but she didn't move. Another knock, a pause, then his voice, muffled through the door. Elena, I read it, all of it. Still, she didn't move. Alina opened the door. Her voice cracked through the silence. I can't. I pause. Are you hurt? No, not physically. She could almost hear the frown in his voice. Then why won't you let me in? She closed her eyes. Because if I do, I'll want to stay close. And if I stay close, you and Luna become targets too. They'll find something, twist something. I'm not going to drag you through this. The silence on the other side was long. Then, you think I care about what people say on the internet? She whispered. You should. A sound, like him sitting down just outside the door. I've dealt with judgment my whole life, Elena. When Luna's mom left, people said I drove her away. When I showed up at school with paint-stained jeans, they looked at me like I didn't belong in the pickup line. None of that broke me. She listened. Her heart hurt. But do you know what would? He continued, voice low. Watching someone I love shut me out because she thinks she's protecting me, when all I want is to be in her corner. She flinched. Kevin, he didn't let her finish. I didn't fall for a perfect woman, he said. I fell for the one who fights, who wakes up every day and chooses to keep going, even when it's hard. I chose the woman who took 2 steps, even when everyone said she'd never stand again. A tear slid down her cheek. I chose you, Elena, not because you needed saving, but because you never gave up on yourself. And I won't let you give up now. She pressed her hand against the door, wishing it were thinner, wishing she were braver. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. I don't need you to fix it, he replied. I just need you to let me in. For the first time in days, the ache in her chest eased, just a little. She reached for the handle, paused, then slowly turned it. The door opened. Kevin stood there, soaked from the light drizzle outside, a quiet steadiness in his eyes that reached right into her storm. He didn't speak. He just stepped in and wrapped his arms around her. And for a moment, the world outside, the headlines, the judgment, the noise, faded. Elena buried her face in his shoulder. She didn't need to be strong tonight. She just needed to feel. He held her tightly, whispering, You're not alone, not this time. And for once, she believed him. The screen blinked once, then twice, and Elena went live. She sat in her living room, a simple white sweater on, no makeup, no lighting, only afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Behind her, a stack of therapy bands rested on a chair, and Luna's drawing of the 3 of them was taped gently to the wall. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, My name is Elena Whitmore. Some of you know me as the CEO of VitalCore. Some of you know me from something far more personal. She inhaled, steadying her voice. 2 years ago, I was in a car accident. I lost the use of my legs. I also lost my fiancé, my sense of purpose, and for a long time, I thought I'd lost my worth. The comments started slow, then faster. Hearts, sad emojis, words like, stay strong, and we see you. But last week, she continued, someone accused me of faking my injury, called me a liar, said I used my condition for attention. And while I could stay quiet, I realized silence protects the wrong people. She tapped a button. On screen, a short video began to play, grainy but alive. The wedding from weeks ago. Elena in her wheelchair, laughing, Luna spinning her hand, Kevin gently turning the chair, the crowd clapping. The first dance. Elena's eyes didn't leave the camera. That moment was real. That joy was real. I wasn't performing. I was living. For the first time in years, she bit her lip. I didn't share my recovery journey because I didn't want pity. I didn't want to be known for what I lost. But I'm learning vulnerability isn't weakness. Healing doesn't need to be hidden. Another breath. I've spent years trying to prove I belonged in boardrooms, filled with men who never once asked how I was really doing, and now I think I'm ready to stop proving anything. She smiled faintly. I've stepped down as CEO, not because I'm ashamed, but because I want to live lighter, truer, slower. I want to love my life, not just lead it. The chat exploded. You're incredible. Thank you for speaking up. This dance made me cry. One comment stood out. We've been waiting for you to come home to yourself. Elena exhaled, then closed the live stream. She let the silence linger, but this time it didn't ache. Kevin stood in the doorway, a mug in hand, eyes soft. He didn't speak at first. He crossed the room, set the mug before her. You were brave, he said, and beautiful. Elena laughed softly. I was terrified. I know, he said. That's what made it real. She reached for his hand. Then, unexpectedly, Kevin knelt beside her chair. No box, no ring, just him. I don't have diamonds, he said, voice trembling. I don't even have a question. Her breath caught. I just have this, he whispered. A promise. Let's walk through life, however long, however slow, together. And one day, when you can stand, and you're ready to dance for real, he paused. I want to be the one holding you. Tears blurred her vision. It wasn't grand, it wasn't scripted, but it was everything. She placed a hand on his cheek. Yes. Yes? Yes, she said again through tears. Not because you saved me, not because you're perfect, but because I finally believe love doesn't have to hurt to be real. Kevin rose, pressed his forehead to hers. Neither spoke. Because sometimes, after a storm, the quiet is the answer. And this was the calm, not before the storm, but after it. After survival. After choosing to stay. After choosing each other. The garden was quiet. Gentle sunlight filtered through the canopy of trees, casting soft shadows on the grass. Rows of white chairs lined the aisle, each decorated with sprigs of lavender and small paper cranes, Luna's idea. At the front, Kevin stood waiting. He adjusted the cuffs of his shirt, took a slow breath, and looked toward the arch draped in fabric and wildflowers. His hands were steady. His heart wasn't. Luna stood beside him in a pale yellow dress, tiny flowers woven into her curls. She clutched a basket filled with petals, swinging it slightly in nervous excitement. Then, the music began. Not the usual wedding march, but a soft piano melody, the same one that played the night Elena first laughed in his arms. Every guest turned. From the back of the garden, Elena appeared. She was wearing a simple, elegant gown, ivory silk that shimmered in the sun. Her golden hair flowed freely over her shoulders. But it wasn't the dress or her beauty that silenced the crowd. It was the way she walked, step by step, unsteady, trembling but unassisted. No wheelchair, no cane, just her, walking forward with every ounce of strength and will she had built over months of quiet, private battles. She didn't rush. She didn't smile wide. She simply walked. And Kevin, his chest tight, throat burning, stepped forward and offered his hand when she reached him. You came to me on your own, he whispered. She nodded. I wanted to walk into this, fully, not as someone needing to be rescued, but as the woman I've become. Kevin pressed her hand to his heart. They turned toward the officiant. Bows were exchanged, simple, honest. Promises not to be perfect, but to be present. To hold space, not expectations. To forgive, to grow, to choose each other, again and again. And then, Elena turned to the guests and smiled, this time fully, radiantly. Now, she said, shall we dance? The music shifted, slow and tender. Kevin gently wrapped his arms around her, supporting her back just enough to steady, not to hold. Elena leaned in, resting her cheek against his shoulder. They swayed. It wasn't graceful in the traditional sense. Her movements were cautious, and his hands occasionally adjusted her balance. But it was theirs. Real, earned. Luna clapped quietly from the side, beaming, and whispered to a nearby guest, "She's dancing for real. I told you she could." Elena tilted her head up and looked at Kevin. "I danced with you in my heart long before my feet could do it," she whispered. "And I've loved you long before this moment," Kevin replied, brushing a kiss to her forehead. The guests watched in silence, many with tears in their eyes, not from pity, but from the quiet awe of witnessing a love that had been tested, forged, and chosen. Because this wasn't just a wedding. It was a homecoming. For a woman who refused to let tragedy define her. For a man who didn't run when love became complicated. And for a little girl whose innocent faith in goodness had sparked it all. As the song played on, Alina closed her eyes and breathed in the moment. Not the applause, not the attention, just the feeling of being whole, of being loved, of finally being free. Thank you for joining the journey of Alina, Kevin, and little Luna. A story not just about love, but about healing and the quiet magic of being seen. If you've ever stood alone like Elena, chose kindness over comfort like Kevin, or believed in someone like Luna, this story was meant for you. Tap the hype button to support soul-stirring stories and subscribe so you never miss the moments that remind us. Even in a broken world, beauty still finds a way. You are seen, you are worthy, you are worth loving.
Millionaire is unjustly sentenced to pay 988 motters to his arrogant ex-wife until a 7-year-old orphan girl reveals the shocking truth. Before we tell this moving tale of sadness and solitude, share where you're watching from and subscribe for more touching stories. The gavel echoed through the courthouse like a gunshot, each bang driving another nail into Marcus Whitmore's financial coffin. Judge Harrison's words cut through his soul like shattered glass. "Mr. Whitmore, you are hereby ordered to pay Elena Whitmore $988 million in alimony and asset division, representing half of your documented wealth accumulated during your 8-year marriage." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters scribbled frantically, cameras flashed despite the no photography rule, and spectators whispered in shocked disbelief. Elena Rodriguez, who had legally taken his name during their supposed marriage, sat in the plaintiff's section wearing a designer Armani suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her crimson lips curved into a victorious smile as she adjusted her pearl necklace, a gesture so calculated and cold that Marcus felt his stomach turn. 8 years of marriage, she had claimed under oath. 8 years of building his empire together, supporting his dreams, sacrificing her own career as a pediatric nurse to be the perfect corporate wife. The jury of 12 Denver citizens had believed every calculated tear, every rehearsed sob, every carefully crafted story of a devoted woman wronged by a heartless billionaire. Marcus's hands trembled as his lead attorney, Jonathan Pierce, a man who charged $800 an hour, whispered urgent appeals about grounds for reversal. At 45 years old, Marcus had built his fortune from nothing. The son of a factory worker and a school cafeteria cook, he had started his first software company in his parents' garage when he was 23, living on ramen noodles and determination. Now everything he had built through decades of 18-hour days was about to disappear. The tech company that employed 3,000 people, the charitable foundations that had built schools in 12 countries, the medical research grants that were finding cures for childhood diseases, all of it would be stripped away by a woman who had manipulated every moment of their relationship with the skill of a master chess player. "Your Honor," Marcus stood on shaking legs, his voice cracking with desperation. "There has to be some mistake. The evidence doesn't add up. My private investigators found inconsistencies in Mr. Whitmore, you've had your chance to present your case over the past 3 months, Judge Harrison interrupted, his face stern behind wire-rimmed glasses. The documentation is clear and comprehensive. Mrs. Whitmore has provided marriage certificates, joint bank statements, photographs spanning 8 years, testimony from alleged friends and colleagues. The jury has deliberated for 16 hours and found unanimously in her favor. Elena's lawyer, David Steinberg, a shark in a $3,000 suit who specialized in high-stakes divorce cases, leaned back in his leather chair with the satisfied expression of a predator who had just secured his biggest kill. They had orchestrated this destruction with surgical precision. Every document, every witness, every carefully crafted lie had led to this moment of financial annihilation. Marcus felt the walls of his life crumbling around him. His mother, who had died 2 years earlier, had always warned him that his wealth would attract the wrong kind of people. "Money changes how people see you, son," she had said from her hospital bed. "Be careful who you trust with your heart." But as Judge Harrison prepared to finalize the devastating ruling that would effectively end Marcus's ability to continue his philanthropic work, the heavy oak courthouse doors burst open with a crash that made everyone turn. A small figure in a worn blue dress ran down the center aisle, her dark hair flying behind her like a banner of hope. The little girl couldn't have been more than 7 years old, clutching a manila envelope against her chest like it contained the secrets of the universe. "Wait! Undi," she shouted, her young voice cutting through the chaos with surprising authority. "They were never really married. I have proof right here that everything is fake." Court security immediately moved toward her, but something in her desperate, intelligent eyes made Judge Harrison raise his hand in a commanding gesture. The courtroom fell completely silent, 300 people staring at this unexpected interruption that had transformed a routine legal proceeding into something extraordinary. Marcus's heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity. He recognized her instantly. Sophie Chen, the orphan who lived at St. Mary's home just 6 blocks from his downtown office. But how could she possibly know anything about his marriage to Elena? And what proof could a 7-year-old child have that his team of expensive lawyers and private investigators had somehow missed? Elena's face had gone completely pale, her confident mask slipping for the first time in the 3 months since these proceedings had begun. 4 hours earlier, 7-year-old Sophie Chen sat cross-legged on the dusty floor of St. Mary's Orphanage Records office, surrounded by cardboard boxes filled with decades of forgotten documents. The room smelled of old paper and faded ink, a repository of lives lived and stories mostly forgotten. Sister Margaret had asked her to help organize old marriage certificates, birth records, and legal documents, a task that most of the other children found mind-numbingly boring. But Sophie was different from the other 23 children who called St. Mary's home. She possessed an unusual gift for seeing patterns, for remembering tiny details that adults overlooked, for understanding complex systems that should have been far beyond her 7 years. The nuns said she had an old soul, but Sophie knew the truth was simpler. When you had no parents to protect you, you learned to protect yourself by paying attention to everything. Sophie had lived at St. Mary's for exactly 7 years, 2 months, and 16 days, ever since the rainy night when a drunk driver had crashed head-on into her parents' Honda Civic on Interstate 25. She had been 10 months old then, too young to remember their faces or voices, but old enough to carry the genetic gifts they had passed down to her, her mother's photographic memory and her father's analytical mind. The nuns had raised her with genuine love and kindness, especially Sister Margaret, who had recognized Sophie's intellectual gifts early and nurtured them carefully. While other children played with dolls or video games, Sophie preferred helping with administrative tasks, organizing files, and learning how the adult world actually functioned through its paperwork and legal requirements. As she methodically sorted through marriage certificates dating back to the 1980s, something caught her eye that made her stomach twist with recognition. A familiar name appeared on a certificate that looked somehow wrong. Marcus Whitmore. She knew that name intimately. He was the extraordinarily kind man who had donated 15 computers to their orphanage's learning center, who sometimes stopped by on Thursday afternoons to read stories to the younger children, who remembered every child's name and asked about their schoolwork with genuine interest. This marriage certificate claimed that Marcus Whitmore had married Elena Rodriguez exactly 8 years, 3 months, and 12 days ago in Mountain Ridge, Colorado. But something about the document immediately struck Sophie as fundamentally wrong. The notary signature looked different from the hundreds of other certificates she had examined, and the official courthouse seal seemed inconsistent with what she knew legitimate seals should look like. Sophie had spent countless hours over the past 3 years helping Sister Margaret with complex paperwork for the orphanage. She knew what authentic legal documents looked like, how they were structured, what kind of paper they used, how official seals were applied. This certificate had subtle inconsistencies that made her trained eye immediately suspicious. She pulled out her tablet, one of the computers that Mr. Whitmore himself had donated to their technology program, and began conducting the kind of methodical research that Sister Margaret had taught her for their historical preservation projects. Her small fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed public records databases, cross-referencing information with the systematic approach of a professional investigator. What she discovered in the next 2 hours made her gasp aloud in the empty records room. The notary listed on Marcus's marriage certificate, Harold Fletcher, had died in a car accident on March 15th, 2014, exactly 2 years and 4 months before the supposed wedding ceremony had taken place. The courthouse seal belonged to the Mountain Ridge Municipal Building, which had been demolished on September 8, 2013. Nearly 3 years before Elena claimed they had been married there. But Sophie's investigation revealed something even more disturbing. Elena Rodriguez had used multiple identities over the past decade, appearing in public records as Elena Martinez in California, Elena Santos in Texas, and Elena Vasquez in Arizona. Each identity came with a different fabricated backstory, different claims about her education and employment, different stories about previous marriages and tragic circumstances. Sophie's heart raced with the terrible excitement of uncovering a conspiracy so complex that it had fooled judges, lawyers, and financial experts. Elena wasn't just a woman trying to take advantage of a wealthy man. She was a sophisticated criminal who had built an entire false identity specifically designed to trap and destroy Marcus Whitmore. 8 years earlier, Marcus Whitmore had been a very different man from the broken figure now sitting in that Denver courtroom. At 37, he was brilliant but profoundly lonely, channeling all his emotional energy into building his software empire because personal relationships had always seemed impossibly complicated. His extraordinary wealth attracted fortune hunters, social climbers, and people who saw him as a walking bank account rather than a human being with hopes, fears, and dreams. Success had come to Marcus faster than he had ever imagined possible. His first company, developed in his parents' garage, had revolutionized data security for small businesses. By 30, he was worth $50 million. By 35, his net worth had climbed to $400 million. But with each milestone, genuine human connections became more elusive and precious. That's exactly why Elena Rodriguez had seemed like an absolute miracle when she entered his life at the Denver Children's Hospital annual charity gala on October 12, 2016. She wasn't working the room like the other women who typically approached him at such events. Instead, she was volunteering at the registration table, beautiful but understated, wearing a simple black dress that probably cost less than the wine being served. "I don't usually approach major donors," she had said with a shy smile that seemed completely genuine, but I wanted to thank you personally for your foundation's contributions to our pediatric ward. The children at Mountain View Elementary got their first computer lab because of your generosity, and seeing their faces light up when they use those machines. Well, it reminded me why I became a nurse in the first place. Marcus had been immediately captivated by her apparent selflessness and genuine passion for helping children. Finally, here was someone who seemed to care about his charitable mission rather than his bank account balance. Over the following months, Elena played her role with Oscar-worthy perfection. She was hesitant about accepting expensive gifts, insisted on modest dinner dates at neighborhood restaurants, and spoke with apparent passion about her work with sick children at the hospital. Every detail of Elena's elaborate backstory had been carefully crafted to lower Marcus's psychological defenses. The abusive ex-husband who had drained her savings and left her afraid to trust wealthy men. The sick mother in Mexico City who needed expensive cancer treatments that Elena couldn't afford on a nurse's salary. The dedication to helping underprivileged children that supposedly left her with no time for a social life or personal relationships. Marcus fell completely and utterly for the sophisticated fiction Elena had constructed around herself. She was everything he had been searching for: intelligent, compassionate, seemingly immune to the corrupting influence of money, and genuinely committed to making the world a better place for vulnerable children. When Elena suggested a private wedding ceremony after 6 months of dating, "I'm too embarrassed about my family situation for a big celebration, and I don't want photographers documenting the most intimate moment of our lives," Marcus agreed immediately. He wanted to protect her from embarrassment, to give her the emotional security she claimed she had never experienced with any other man. The ceremony had taken place on a cold Thursday afternoon in February 2017 in what Eleanor claimed was a small courthouse in Mountain Ridge, a picturesque town 2 hours outside Denver. Marcus had driven there through a snowstorm, believing he was about to marry the woman who would finally make his life complete and meaningful. The officiant had been professional and warm. The paperwork seemed completely legitimate, and Elena had cried what appeared to be tears of pure joy as they exchanged vows in the small, wood-paneled room. Marcus never suspected for even a moment that the entire event was an elaborate theatrical performance, staged in a building that wasn't even a functioning courthouse anymore. For the first 18 months of their supposed marriage, Elena had been everything Marcus had dreamed of in a life partner. She was the devoted wife who supported his business decisions, hosted charity events with grace and charm, and seemed genuinely invested in building a shared future dedicated to helping others. But Elena's true nature had begun emerging gradually, like poison, seeping through tiny cracks in a foundation. The sweet, selfless nurse slowly revealed herself to be demanding, materialistic, and coldly calculating in ways that Marcus initially explained away as stress or adjustment to their new life together. By the time Marcus fully realized what was happening, Elena had positioned herself perfectly as the ideal wronged wife, ready to destroy him completely and walk away with enough money to fund her deceptions for the rest of her life. 7-year-old Sophie Chen ran through the busy streets of downtown Denver with more pure determination than most adults ever summon in their entire lives. The manila envelope containing her explosive evidence bounced against her chest as her small legs carried her toward the courthouse, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and absolute moral certainty. She had never left St. Mary's Orphanage alone before. The nuns had strict rules about children venturing into the city without supervision, but this situation was bigger than following institutional policies. Mr. Whitmore had always been genuinely kind to the forgotten children that society typically overlooked. When other wealthy philanthropists donated money and never looked back, Marcus actually visited regularly, spending time with kids who desperately needed positive adult attention. Sophie remembered vividly the previous Christmas when she had been bedridden with pneumonia and couldn't participate in the holiday party with the other children. While everyone else was opening presents and eating cake in the main hall, Marcus had quietly slipped into the infirmary and sat beside her bed for over an hour, reading her favorite story about a brave little princess who saved her kingdom through intelligence and courage rather than magic or royal privilege. "You know, Sophie," he had said that day, his voice gentle and encouraging, "sometimes the smallest people can make the biggest difference in the world. It's not about how tall you are or how much money you have. It's about having the courage to do what's right, even when it's scary." Now, as Sophie navigated the intimidating maze of downtown Denver, those words echoed in her mind like a personal mission statement. It was her turn to be brave for someone who had always shown kindness to children who had nothing and no one to protect them. The courthouse steps seemed absolutely enormous to her small frame. Each step was nearly half her height, but Sophie climbed them with fierce determination, clutching the envelope that contained the power to save a good man from complete destruction. Inside the building, the environment was overwhelmingly intimidating. Soaring ceilings, polished marble floors, and serious-looking adults in expensive business suits walking quickly past her as if she were invisible. "Excuse me, sir," Sophie said politely to a uniformed security guard, tugging gently on his sleeve to get his attention. "I need to find Mr. Marcus Whitmore's trial. I have really important evidence that could change everything." The guard looked down at this tiny girl with initially skeptical eyes. Children didn't typically appear in federal courthouses carrying legal evidence. "Little lady, you can't just walk into active legal proceedings. Where are your parents or guardian?" "My parents died in a car accident when I was a baby," Sophie explained simply, without any trace of self-pity. "I live at St. Mary's Orphanage with the nuns. But this is really, really important. Mr. Whitmore is about to lose almost $1 billion because of lies, and I can prove that his whole marriage was completely fake." Something in her earnest, intelligent expression made the security guard pause and reconsider his initial dismissal. This wasn't a confused child or someone playing games. Her vocabulary, her posture, her direct eye contact, everything about her suggested someone far more mature than her 7 years should have allowed. "What kind of proof could you possibly have, sweetheart?" he asked, kneeling down to her eye level with genuine curiosity. Sophie opened the envelope carefully and showed him the top document. "The marriage certificate is completely fraudulent. The notary who supposedly signed it was already dead when the ceremony took place, and the courthouse where they claimed to have gotten married was demolished 3 years before their wedding date. I have death certificates, demolition records, and public documents that prove Mrs. Elena Rodriguez has been using multiple fake identities to commit marriage fraud in at least 4 different states." The guard's expression transformed from skepticism to amazement, then to urgent concern. This little girl was speaking with the precision and authority of a trained legal investigator, presenting evidence that could potentially overturn $1 billion court ruling. "How do you know Mr. Whitmore?" he asked. "He donates computers and supplies to our orphanage and comes to read stories to us younger kids. He always remembers our names and asks about our schoolwork like we actually matter to him. He's one of the few adults who treats orphans like we're real people instead of just charity cases. That woman is trying to steal everything from him using completely fake documents, and somebody has to stop her." Just then, they both heard angry shouting echoing from courtroom 7. The guard quickly led Sophie toward the disturbance, where they could see through the small reinforced window that Marcus's trial was reaching its devastating climax. Elena sat in the plaintiff's section with a triumphant smile as Judge Harrison prepared to rule in her favor. Sophie looked up at the security guard with eyes that held far too much wisdom for someone her age. "Please," she whispered, "let me save him." The massive courthouse doors crashed open with a sound like thunder, and every person in courtroom 7 turned to stare as 7-year-old Sophie Chen ran down the center aisle with the determined stride of someone on a mission from God himself. Her small voice cut through the shocked silence with crystal clarity. "Your Honor, they were never legally married. I have documented proof that their entire marriage was an elaborate fraud." Judge Harrison leaned forward over his elevated bench, his stern expression softening with surprise as he studied this completely unexpected interruption. In 32 years of presiding over legal proceedings, he had never witnessed anything quite like this moment. "Young lady," he said with gentle authority, "this is a very serious legal proceeding involving nearly $1 billion in disputed assets. What exactly do you believe you have there?" Sophie walked forward with careful, measured steps, her worn sneakers squeaking softly on the polished courthouse floor. Despite being surrounded by hundreds of intimidating adults, she showed no signs of nervousness or uncertainty. "Your Honor, my name is Sophie Chen. I'm 7 years old, and I live at St. Mary's Orphanage on Colfax Avenue. Mr. Whitmore has been very kind to all of us children there, donating computers and reading us stories, and I couldn't let him lose everything because of lies." Elena Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her perfectly composed demeanor beginning to crack like ice under sudden pressure. Her high-priced attorney, David Steinberg, whispered urgently in her ear, but Elena's face was rapidly draining of color. "I was helping Sister Margaret organize old legal documents this morning," Sophie continued, her young voice remarkably steady and clear, "and I discovered Mr. Whitmore's marriage certificate in our files. But something looked wrong with it, so I used our computer lab to investigate." She held up the manila envelope with both hands like a sacred offering. The notary who allegedly signed their marriage certificate was named Harold Fletcher. But Mr. Fletcher died in a car accident on March 15, 2014. This certificate claims he notarized their marriage ceremony on June 18, 2016, more than 2 years after he was already dead. A collective gasp rippled through the packed courtroom. Several jurors leaned forward in their seats, and Marcus felt his heart begin to race with the first genuine hope he had experienced in months. Sophie opened her envelope and carefully extracted a thick stack of official documents. Additionally, the courthouse seal on this marriage certificate belongs to the Mountain Ridge Municipal Building. But according to county demolition records, that building was completely torn down on September 8, 2013, nearly 3 years before Mrs. Rodriguez claims they were married there. Judge Harrison's eyes widened with each revelation. "Approach the bench immediately, young lady." Sophie walked forward confidently, extending the papers toward the judge with small hands that showed no trembling whatsoever. As Judge Harrison began examining the documents, his expression grew increasingly grave and focused. "Furthermore," Sophie continued, her voice gaining strength and authority, "Elena Rodriguez has been using multiple false identities across several states. She was Elena Martinez when she married wealthy businessman David Thompson in San Diego, California in 2012. She became Elena Santos when she filed for bankruptcy in Houston, Texas in 2014, claiming to have been married to oil executive Robert Hayes. In Phoenix, Arizona, she used the name Elena Vasquez to establish credit accounts and rental agreements. Elena suddenly stood up, her calm facade completely shattered. "This is absolutely ridiculous. You're going to overturn months of careful legal proceedings based on the fantasies of some random orphan child. She's obviously been coached by Marcus's legal team to fabricate these ridiculous accusations." But Sophie wasn't finished with her presentation. She pulled out another set of documents with the methodical precision of a seasoned investigator. "I also discovered that Elena Rodriguez never actually worked as a pediatric nurse at Denver Children's Hospital, despite claiming this employment under oath. There are no payroll records, no employee identification numbers, no colleagues who remember working with her. Mountain View Elementary School has no record of receiving computer equipment donations facilitated by anyone named Elena Rodriguez. Judge Harrison examined each document with increasingly intense scrutiny, his legal training immediately recognizing the authenticity of Sophie's evidence. The marriage certificate that had seemed so official and convincing just minutes before now appeared obviously fraudulent when subjected to proper verification. Marcus felt his entire world shifting on its axis as the pieces of a puzzle he had never understood began falling into place with devastating clarity. All those times Eleanor had been mysteriously vague about her work schedule, all those charity events where her supposed nursing colleagues never materialized, all those stories that had never quite added up, everything now made perfect, horrible sense. "Your Honor," Marcus's lead attorney said, rising quickly from his seat, "we respectfully request an immediate recess to thoroughly examine this new evidence and verify these extraordinary claims." But Elena was already moving desperately toward the courtroom exit, her composure completely destroyed. The woman who had walked into court that morning, expecting to claim nearly $1 billion in fraudulent alimony, was now fleeing like the sophisticated criminal she had always been. The little orphan girl had just exposed one of the most elaborate marriage fraud schemes in American legal history. As Elena Rodriguez rushed toward the courtroom exit in full panic mode, Judge Harrison's voice boomed across the room with commanding authority. "Mrs. Rodriguez, or whatever your actual legal name might be, you will remain seated until these proceedings are properly concluded. Bailiffs, please ensure that the defendant does not leave this courtroom." 2 court officers immediately moved to block the exits while Elena froze in the center aisle, her designer heels clicking to an abrupt halt on the marble floor. Her carefully constructed mask of wounded innocence had completely disintegrated, replaced by the cold, calculating expression that revealed her true nature for the first time since the trial had begun. Sophie, still standing confidently near the judge's bench, continued presenting her meticulously researched evidence with the systematic precision of someone far beyond her 7 years of life experience. "Your Honor, my investigation also revealed that Elena Rodriguez has been illegally collecting Social Security disability benefits under 3 different names and Social Security numbers. She owns undisclosed real estate properties in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Miami, Florida, that were never mentioned during these divorce proceedings." Marcus stared at this remarkable little girl in absolute amazement and profound gratitude. In the span of a single morning, Sophie had accomplished what his team of expensive private investigators and attorneys had failed to achieve over months of professional effort. She had unraveled a deception so sophisticated and comprehensive that it had fooled judges, financial experts, and seasoned legal professionals. Judge Harrison was now studying additional documents that Sophie had provided, his expression growing darker and more concerned with each page he reviewed. "Miss Chen, these are extremely serious criminal allegations you're presenting. How did you know to look for these specific types of fraudulent activities?" Sophie's voice carried the quiet wisdom of someone who had learned too young that the adult world was often built on lies and deception. At St. Mary's Orphanage, Sister Margaret teaches all of us children to always carefully verify official documents, because some bad people try to fake adoption papers and birth certificates to take children away for terrible reasons. She showed us how to check notary seals, courthouse records, cross-reference Social Security numbers, and verify employment histories. The practical, street-smart education that Sophie had received as an orphan had equipped her with exactly the investigative skills needed to expose Elena's elaborate criminal enterprise. While privileged children learned piano lessons and tennis, Sophie had learned how to protect herself by understanding the systems that adults use to lie and manipulate. Elena's attorney, David Steinberg, was frantically whispering to his client, but Elena angrily pushed him away. "This is completely insane," she hissed loudly enough for the entire courtroom to hear. "You're going to destroy months of legitimate legal proceedings because of some orphan's ridiculous conspiracy theories? This child has obviously been brainwashed and coached by Marcus's legal team, but the damage was irreversible and devastating." Judge Harrison had examined enough evidence to understand that absolutely everything about Eleanor's case had been built on an elaborate foundation of lies, forged documents, and stolen identities. The marriage certificate was fake, her employment history was fabricated, her victim narrative was a carefully rehearsed performance, and her entire legal identity was a criminal fiction designed to steal nearly $1 billion. "Mr. Whitmore," Judge Harrison said with grave solemnity, "it appears that you have been the victim of an extremely sophisticated and premeditated fraud conspiracy. Miss Chen's evidence strongly suggests that not only was your marriage certificate completely fabricated, but that the defendant has perpetrated similar criminal schemes against multiple wealthy individuals across several states." Marcus felt an overwhelming mixture of relief, fury, and profound gratitude washing over him in powerful waves. Relief that his life's work and philanthropic mission wouldn't be destroyed by a criminal's lies. Fury that he had been so completely and systematically deceived by someone he had genuinely loved and trusted. But overriding both emotions was deep, transformative gratitude toward the brave little girl who had risked everything to save a man she barely knew. As court officers moved to officially detain Elena on charges of fraud, identity theft, and perjury, she turned toward Marcus with pure, undiluted hatred burning in her eyes. "You think you've won something here, Marcus? There are dozens of others like me out there, and some of them are much smarter than I am. You'll never be able to trust anyone ever again. I've destroyed your ability to believe in love, and that's worth more than any money." But Marcus wasn't looking at Elena anymore. His entire attention was focused on Sophie Chen, this absolutely extraordinary child who had demonstrated more courage, integrity, and moral strength than any adult in that courtroom. The little orphan girl who had saved him from financial destruction was about to change his life in ways that neither of them could yet begin to imagine. The first chapter of their incredible story together was ending, but Sophie's dramatic revelation in that Denver courthouse was actually just the beginning of something much more profound and life-changing than anyone could have predicted. 3 weeks after the explosive courtroom revelation that had made national headlines, Marcus Whitmore sat in the sterile visiting room of St. Mary's Orphanage, his hands trembling slightly as he watched Sophie Chen carefully arrange a chess set between them. The little girl who had saved his fortune moved each piece with the same methodical precision she had shown while destroying Elena's elaborate fraud. "Sister Margaret taught me to play last year," Sophie said quietly, her small fingers positioning the white pawns in perfect formation. "She said chess helps children like us learn to think several moves ahead, to protect ourselves by seeing patterns that other people miss." Marcus studied her face, still amazed by the intelligence that sparkled behind those dark eyes. "Sophie, I need you to understand something very important, what you did in that courtroom. You saved my entire life's work. Because of your courage, I can continue helping children all over the world." Sophie looked up from the chessboard with an expression far too serious for someone her age. "I know about your schools in Africa and the hospitals in South America. Sister Margaret showed us articles about the good things you do with your money. That's why I couldn't let that bad woman steal it all." The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and law enforcement investigations. Elena Rodriguez, whose real name turned out to be Carmen Elena Vasquez, was now facing federal charges in 4 states. The FBI had discovered that her marriage fraud scheme had targeted at least 6 wealthy men over the past decade, stealing an estimated $37 million before Marcus became her biggest intended victim. "I've been thinking about something," Marcus said, moving his first pawn forward. "You're clearly too intelligent to be limited by a standard curriculum. Have you ever thought about what you want to be when you grow up?" Sophie considered her response move carefully, both on the chessboard and in their conversation. "I want to help other children who don't have families. Maybe become a lawyer so I can stop bad people from hurting kids, or a detective so I can solve mysteries that grown-ups can't figure out." Marcus felt his heart constrict with emotion. This remarkable child had already demonstrated more moral courage and investigative skill than most adults would show in a lifetime. "What if I told you that I want to help make sure you get the best education possible? I'd like to set up a special scholarship fund just for you." "That's very kind, Mr. Whitmore, but—" Sophie moved her knight in an unexpected pattern that immediately put pressure on Marcus's position. "I've learned that when adults make big promises to orphans, they usually disappear after a few months. People feel guilty for a while, but then they forget about us." The painful honesty in her voice hit Marcus like a physical blow. How many times had well-meaning adults made promises to these children only to abandon them when the novelty wore off? "Sophie, I want you to understand something. I'm not going anywhere. What happened between us in that courtroom, it changed me. You didn't just save my money, you reminded me what real courage looks like." Sister Margaret appeared in the doorway, her kind face creased with concern. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a development. The State Child Services investigator is here. Someone has filed a petition to adopt Sophie." Sophie's chess piece froze halfway to its destination. "What? Who would want to adopt me? I'm 7 years old. Most people want babies, not kids who ask too many questions." Marcus felt a sudden protective fury rise in his chest. After everything Sophie had been through, after the incredible courage she had shown, someone was trying to use her moment of fame for their own purposes. "Sister Margaret, do we know who filed this petition?" "A couple from California named the Hendersons. They saw Sophie on the news and claim they've always wanted to help a special needs child. But—" Sister Margaret's expression was troubled. "Something doesn't feel right about them. They're asking very specific questions about Sophie's inheritance potential and your relationship with her." Sophie set down her chess piece and looked directly at Marcus with eyes that held far too much understanding of adult motivations. "They think you're going to give me money because I helped you, don't they? They want to adopt me so they can get rich." The thought that anyone would try to exploit this brave, brilliant child made Marcus's hands clench into fists. Sophie had already been through enough manipulation and deception with Elena's case. She deserved protection, not more people trying to use her for financial gain. "Over my dead body," Marcus said quietly, his voice filled with steel. "Sophie, I want you to know that I will not let anyone take advantage of you, not ever again." Sister Margaret looked between them with growing understanding. "Mr. Whitmore, what exactly are you suggesting?" Marcus took a deep breath, realizing that he was about to make the most important decision of his life. "I'm suggesting that if Sophie is willing, and if the courts approve, I would like to file my own adoption petition. This little girl saved my life, and I want to spend the rest of mine making sure she has every opportunity she deserves." Sophie stared at him in complete shock, her chess strategy forgotten. For the first time since he had known her, she looked exactly like what she was, a 7-year-old child who had never dared to hope that someone might actually want her forever. The following morning, Marcus sat across from Family Court Judge Patricia Williams in her chambers, with Sophie beside him and Sister Margaret serving as her advocate. The Henderson couple, Robert and Linda Henderson from Beverly Hills, sat on the opposite side of the room with their attorney, their expressions growing increasingly frustrated as the proceedings unfolded. "Your Honor," Robert Henderson said, his voice carrying the entitled tone of someone accustomed to getting his way, "we have substantial financial resources and can provide Sophie with opportunities that a single man, regardless of his wealth, simply cannot offer. She needs a traditional family structure with both a mother and father figure." Judge Williams, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and 30 years of experience dealing with child welfare cases, studied the adoption petitions carefully. Mr. Henderson, I've reviewed your application, and I notice that this is your first contact with our adoption system. You've never fostered children, never volunteered with youth organizations, and you filed this petition just 4 days after Sophie's story appeared on national television. Linda Henderson shifted uncomfortably in her designer suit. We were inspired by Sophie's courage and intelligence. We believe we can provide her with the cultural advantages and educational opportunities that her exceptional abilities deserve. Sophie had been unusually quiet throughout the proceedings, but now she spoke up with characteristic directness. Your Honor, may I ask Mrs. Henderson a question? Judge Williams nodded. Of course, Sophie. This decision affects your life more than anyone else's. Sophie turned to face Linda Henderson with the serious expression of someone conducting an important interview. Mrs. Henderson, what's my favorite book? Linda Henderson blinked in surprise. I assume children your age enjoy picture books, or perhaps early chapter books. It's A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle, Sophie said quietly. Mr. Whitmore knows that because he's read it to me 3 times. What's my biggest fear? Robert Henderson interjected impatiently. This is hardly relevant to our ability to provide. Being forgotten, Sophie continued, ignoring his interruption. I'm afraid that people will stop caring about me once the cameras go away, and I'm not famous anymore. Mr. Whitmore knows that because we've talked about it. What do I want to be when I grow up? The Hendersons exchanged uncertain glances. They had clearly expected this to be a simple matter of filling out paperwork and claiming custody of a child who had suddenly become valuable. I want to become either a federal investigator or a family court judge like you, Your Honor, so I can protect other children from people who try to hurt them. Mr. Whitmore knows that because he's been helping me research law schools and detective training programs. Judge Williams leaned forward with interest. Mr. Whitmore, how long have you known Sophie? About 2 years, Your Honor. I've been visiting St. Mary's regularly to work with their computer education program. Sophie has always stood out, not just because of her intelligence, but because of her character. She helps younger children with their homework. She volunteers for extra chores to help the nuns. And she's never asked me for anything, not once, until she risked everything to save me from fraud. Marcus pulled out a folder thick with documents. I've prepared a comprehensive plan for Sophie's education and care, private tutoring to advance her academic development, counseling to help her process her early trauma, exposure to cultural activities and travel, and most importantly, unconditional love and support from someone who already knows and values exactly who she is. Sister Margaret spoke up for the first time. Your Honor, I've watched Mr. Whitmore interact with our children for 2 years. He never makes promises he doesn't keep. He treats every child with genuine respect, and Sophie lights up whenever he visits. This isn't a publicity stunt or a financial arrangement. This is about 2 people who have found family in each other. Robert Henderson's frustration finally boiled over. This is ridiculous. A single billionaire cannot provide the stable family environment that a child needs. Sophie requires proper supervision, feminine role models, and— Mr. Henderson, Judge Williams interrupted sharply, are you suggesting that single parents are inherently unfit? Because that would disqualify approximately 30% of American families. Sophie looked up at Marcus with eyes that held a mixture of hope and terror. Mr. Whitmore, are you sure you want to adopt me? I'm not easy to take care of. I ask too many questions. I read instead of playing with toys. And I have nightmares sometimes about my parents' accident. Marcus knelt down to Sophie's eye level, his voice gentle but absolutely certain. Sophie, you are the most remarkable person I've ever met. Your questions make me think harder. Your intelligence inspires me to be better, and if you have nightmares, I'll sit with you until they go away. You saved my life, and I want to spend the rest of mine helping you achieve anything you can dream of. Judge Williams had been watching this exchange with the practiced eye of someone who had seen countless adoption cases. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, I'm denying your petition. You've demonstrated no prior relationship with Sophie, no understanding of her individual needs, and your motivation appears to be opportunistic rather than altruistic." She turned to Marcus and Sophie with a slight smile. "Mr. Whitmore, I'm granting a provisional adoption order pending the completion of standard background checks and home studies. Sophie, you'll have a 30-day trial period to make sure this is what you really want." Sophie threw her arms around Marcus's neck with the pure joy of a child who had finally found her forever home. 6 months later, Sophie Chen Whitmore stood in the marble entryway of Marcus's Denver mansion, staring up at a portrait that had just been delivered and hung in the place of honor above the grand staircase. The painting showed the two of them in the courthouse on the day she had exposed Elena's fraud. Marcus in his expensive suit, looking stunned and grateful, and Sophie in her simple blue dress, holding the manila envelope that had changed both their lives forever. "Do you like it?" Marcus asked, coming up behind her with 2 cups of hot chocolate topped with marshmallows, their evening tradition that had developed over the months since the adoption was finalized. Sophie studied the painting thoughtfully. "It's beautiful, but it makes that day look more heroic than it felt. I was terrified I might be wrong, that the adults would laugh at me and send me away." Marcus sat down on the bottom step of the staircase so they could be at eye level. "Sophie, that's exactly what made it heroic. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right even when you're terrified." The past 6 months had been a period of adjustment for both of them. Marcus had converted an entire wing of his house into Sophie's private space. A bedroom decorated in her favorite colors, a library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a study area equipped with advanced computer systems where she could pursue her passion for research and investigation. Sophie had been enrolled in an accelerated academic program that challenged her exceptional intelligence while still allowing her to be a child. She had also started working with Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a child psychologist who specialized in helping gifted children process trauma and develop healthy coping mechanisms. "Dad," Sophie said, the word still felt new and wonderful to both of them, "I've been thinking about something. The FBI investigator, Agent Patterson, said that Carmen, had hurt other people before she tried to hurt you. What happened to the money she stole from those other men?" Marcus had been wondering when Sophie would ask about this. Her sense of justice was so strong that he knew she wouldn't be satisfied until all of Elena's victims received some form of restitution. "Most of the money was never recovered," Marcus admitted. "She spent it on luxury items, gambling, and funding her false identities. The FBI was able to seize about $4 million in assets, but that's only a fraction of what she stole over the years." Sophie was quiet for a long moment, her analytical mind clearly working through a complex problem. "Dad, what if we could help those people? Not by giving them money directly, but by using your foundation to support causes they care about, like making donations in their names to charities they support?" Marcus felt his heart swell with pride and amazement. Even at 7 years old, Sophie's first instinct was to heal the damage that Elena had caused, rather than simply celebrate their own victory. "That's a brilliant idea, sweetheart. We could reach out to Elena's other victims and ask them to choose charitable causes that matter to them. It wouldn't replace their financial losses, but it might help them feel like something positive came from their terrible experiences." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "And we could also use what happened to educate other people about marriage fraud. Maybe create a website or write a book about the warning signs that people should watch for." Marcus realized that his daughter, the word filled him with joy every time he thought it, was already thinking like the advocate and protector she hoped to become. Her traumatic experience with Elena's deception was being transformed into a mission to prevent other people from suffering similar betrayals. "Sophie, there's something else I want to talk to you about. Agent Patterson called this morning. They've arrested 2 more people who were working with Elena. a forger who created fake documents, and a private investigator who helped her research wealthy targets. The prosecutor wants to know if you'd be willing to testify at their trials." Sophie's expression grew serious. "Would my testimony help put them in prison so they can't hurt other families?" "Yes, it probably would. But testifying means facing defense attorneys who might try to make you feel bad about what you did, or suggest that you were lying about the evidence you found." Sophie stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where Marcus had installed a playground and climbing structure for her to enjoy. After a few minutes of thoughtful silence, she turned back to him with determination in her eyes. "Dad, you told me that courage means doing what's right, even when it's scary. Those people helped Elena try to steal your money and destroy your life. If I don't testify, they might do the same thing to other families. I have to help stop them." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes as he watched his remarkable daughter choose justice over comfort once again. Sophie had lost her birth parents to a drunk driver's selfishness, but she was determined to use her own experiences to protect other people from predators and criminals. "I'm so proud of you, Sophie. We'll make sure you have all the support you need." The federal courthouse in Denver was packed with media and spectators as Sophie Chen Whitmore, now 8 years old, walked to the witness stand with the same calm determination she had shown during her first dramatic courthouse appearance. She wore a simple navy blue dress and carried herself with dignity far beyond her years. Marcus sat in the front row, his hands clenched with nervous energy as he watched his daughter prepare to face the defense attorney who would try to discredit her testimony. Agent Patterson had warned them that the lawyer representing Eleanor's accomplices was known for aggressive cross-examination tactics, even with child witnesses. "Miss Chen Whitmore," the prosecutor began gently, "can you tell the court about your relationship with the defendant Marcus Whitmore?" "He's my adoptive father," Sophie said clearly into the microphone. "But before the adoption, I knew him as a kind man who donated computers to our orphanage and read stories to the children." "And can you describe how you discovered the fraudulent marriage certificate?" Sophie methodically explained her investigation process, from finding the suspicious document to cross-referencing public records to uncovering Elena's multiple false identities. Her testimony was precise, factual, and devastating to the defense's case. But when Elena's defense attorney, Martin Crawford, stood up for cross-examination, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Crawford was a thin man in his 50s with cold eyes and a reputation for destroying witness credibility through intimidation. "Miss Chen Whitmore," Crawford began with false friendliness, "isn't it true that you now stand to inherit millions of dollars from Mr. Whitmore because of your testimony against my client?" Sophie looked confused by the question. "I don't understand what you mean, sir." "Come now, young lady. You're living in a mansion, attending expensive private schools, and enjoying a lifestyle you never could have imagined at that orphanage. Isn't it possible that you fabricated evidence against Ms. Rodriguez because you knew it would make you rich?" Marcus started to rise from his seat, furious at the attorney's implications, but Sophie's clear voice stopped him. "Sir, I didn't know Mr. Whitmore was planning to adopt me when I brought the evidence to court. I was just trying to stop a bad person from stealing money that helps children all over the world. And I didn't fabricate anything. I can show you exactly how to verify every document I found." Crawford pressed harder, clearly hoping to rattle the young witness. "But surely you realize that discrediting Ms. Rodriguez has made you very wealthy. Doesn't that create a motivation for you to lie?" Sophie was quiet for a moment, and Marcus held his breath. Then she spoke with the wisdom of someone who had learned early in life what really mattered. "Mr. Crawford, before Mr. Whitmore adopted me, I lived in a room with 3 other girls at St. Mary's Orphanage. I owned 2 dresses, 4 books, and a stuffed elephant named Buttons. I was happy because the nuns loved us and took good care of us. Now I live in a big house with my dad, and I have lots of books and nice clothes, and I'm still happy, but not because of the money." She paused and looked directly at the attorney. I'm happy because I have a family. And having a family isn't something you can buy or steal or lie about. It's something that happens when people choose to love each other. Your client Elena tried to steal Mr. Whitmore's money, but what she really tried to steal was his ability to trust people and build a real family. That's much worse than taking money. The courtroom was completely silent. Crawford, for the first time in his career, found himself speechless in the face of an 8-year-old's moral clarity. Judge Martinez leaned forward. "Mr. Crawford, do you have any further questions for this witness?" Crawford looked at Sophie's steady gaze and realized that any further attacks would only make his client look worse. "No further questions, Your Honor." As Sophie stepped down from the witness stand, Marcus felt overwhelming pride in the extraordinary young woman his daughter was becoming. She had faced down a ruthless attorney with the same courage she had shown in exposing Elena's fraud, not because she was fearless, but because she understood that some things were worth being afraid for. Agent Patterson met them outside the courtroom with a broad smile. "Sophie, that was one of the most powerful testimonies I've ever witnessed. You just guaranteed that Elena's accomplices will spend the next decade in federal prison." But Sophie was already thinking ahead to their next mission. "Agent Patterson, have you found all of Elena's victims yet? Dad and I want to start our charitable restitution program as soon as possible." 2 years after Sophie's courtroom triumph, the Chen Whitmore Foundation had become one of the most respected charitable organizations in the country, focusing specifically on protecting children from fraud, abuse, and exploitation. 10-year-old Sophie now served as the Foundation's youngest board member, bringing a unique perspective to their mission of safeguarding vulnerable youth. Marcus stood in the Foundation's conference room, watching with pride as Sophie presented their latest initiative to a group of potential donors and partner organizations. She had grown taller and more confident, but her essential character, brilliant, compassionate, and fiercely committed to justice, remained unchanged. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sophie said, standing behind a podium that had been lowered to accommodate her height, "child exploitation often succeeds because predators count on children being too afraid or too ashamed to speak up. Our Young Investigators program teaches kids how to recognize dangerous situations, how to verify adult claims, and how to report suspicious behavior safely." The audience, which included FBI agents, child psychologists, and executives from major corporations, listened with rapt attention as Sophie outlined their comprehensive approach to child protection. "We've already implemented this program in 43 schools across 7 states, Sophie continued, "and we've prevented at least 12 potential cases of adoption fraud, 6 instances of identity theft targeting minors, and 3 attempted kidnappings." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a child development specialist from Johns Hopkins, raised her hand. "Sophie, this is remarkably sophisticated work for someone your age. How do you balance this level of responsibility with normal childhood activities?" Sophie smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from her during the formal presentation. "Dr. Mitchell, protecting other kids isn't work for me. It's like, imagine if you could use your favorite hobby to save people's lives. That's what this feels like." After the presentation, Marcus and Sophie walked through downtown Denver toward their favorite ice cream shop, a monthly tradition they had maintained since the adoption. Sophie was unusually quiet, and Marcus could tell something was troubling her. "Sweetheart, what's on your mind?" he asked as they settled into their usual corner booth. Sophie stirred her chocolate ice cream thoughtfully. "Dad, I've been thinking about something important. Next month I'll be 11, and I've been with you for almost 3 years now. I want to make sure you're still happy about adopting me." Marcus felt his heart constrict. "Sophie, why would you even question that? You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "Because I know I'm not like other kids," Sophie said quietly. "I don't play with dolls or watch cartoons. I'd rather read case studies than go to birthday parties. Sometimes I wonder if you wish you had adopted a more normal daughter who would be easier to relate to." Marcus reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "Sophie, Do you remember what you told that defense attorney about family? You said that family happens when people choose to love each other. I chose to love you exactly as you are. Brilliant, serious, caring, and absolutely unique. I don't want you to be normal. Normal wouldn't have saved my life. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, something Marcus rarely saw from his usually composed daughter. Sometimes I still have nightmares about losing you. What if something happens to you, like what happened to my birth parents? What if I end up alone again? Marcus felt the weight of understanding. Sophie's fierce independence and maturity were partly defense mechanisms, ways of protecting herself from the vulnerability of loving someone who might disappear from her life. Sophie, I can't promise that nothing will ever happen to me, but I can promise that you will never be alone again. I've set up legal guardianship arrangements with 3 different families who know and love you. I've established trust funds that will ensure your education and security no matter what happens. And most importantly, you're not the same person you were when your birth parents died. He squeezed her hand gently. You were a baby then, helpless and dependent on others for everything. Now you're Sophie Chen Whitmore, the girl who exposed a criminal conspiracy, who testifies before Congress about child protection, who has already saved dozens of children from dangerous situations. You're not helpless anymore, sweetheart. You're one of the strongest people I know. Sophie wiped her eyes and looked at him with gratitude and love. Dad, there's something else I want to tell you. Last week, Sister Margaret told me that a documentary filmmaker wants to make a movie about our story. They want to call it The Little Girl's Truth. Marcus raised his eyebrows. What do you think about that? I think it could help other kids learn to protect themselves. But only if we get to tell the story our way, and only if all the profits go to help other children in foster care and orphanages. Marcus smiled at his daughter's instinctive generosity and wisdom. I think that sounds perfect, Sophie. We'll make sure the world knows that sometimes the smallest voices can speak the most important truths. 5 years later, 15-year-old Sophie Chen Whitmore stood at the podium in the United States Capitol building, addressing a joint session of Congress about the landmark Child Protection Verification Act, legislation she had helped draft to prevent adoption fraud and identity theft targeting minors. Marcus sat in the gallery, his heart swelling with pride as he watched his remarkable daughter advocate for vulnerable children on the national stage. Honorable senators and representatives, Sophie began, her voice clear and confident. When I was 7 years old, I discovered that sometimes adults lie in very sophisticated ways to hurt children and families. Today, the Chen Whitmore Foundation has documented over 300 cases of adoption fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation targeting minors. This legislation will create the verification systems necessary to protect America's most vulnerable citizens. Indeed, the chamber was packed with legislators, child advocacy groups, and media representatives covering what had become known as Sophie's Law, though she insisted on naming it after all the children who had suffered rather than claiming personal credit. After her testimony, Sophie and Marcus walked through the Capitol Gardens, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. The documentary about their story had won an Academy Award and donated its profits to establish child protection programs in 12 countries. Sophie's educational foundation had provided scholarships to over 500 orphans and foster children, and Elena Vasquez was serving a 25-year federal sentence for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Dad, Sophie said as they sat on a bench overlooking the Washington Monument, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found those documents that day at St. Mary's? Marcus considered the question seriously. You would have found another way to save me, sweetheart. Maybe not that day, but eventually. Because that's who you are. Someone who can't stand to see injustice and won't rest until she fixes it. Sophie, now a sophomore at Georgetown University studying law and criminal justice at age 15, had maintained her commitment to protecting children while also allowing herself to experience more typical teenage activities. She played chess competitively, volunteered at local orphanages, and had even started dating a fellow student named David, who shared her passion for social justice. "Sometimes I think about Elena," Sophie admitted. "Not because I feel sorry for her, but because I wonder what made her become someone who could hurt people so easily." "Do you think she was born evil, or did something happen to her that broke her empathy?" It was a profound question that Marcus had pondered himself. "I think Elena made choices, Sophie. Maybe she experienced trauma or hardship that influenced those choices, but ultimately she decided to use her intelligence to harm people rather than help them." "You experienced trauma too, losing your parents, living in an orphanage, facing uncertainty about your future, but you chose to use your gifts to protect others." Sophie nodded thoughtfully. "The difference is that I was surrounded by people who taught me that hurting others was wrong. Sister Margaret, you, Dr. Morrison, all of you showed me that using my abilities to help people would make me happier than using them for selfish purposes." As the sun set over the capital, casting golden light across the gardens, Marcus reflected on the extraordinary young woman his daughter had become. Sophie had not only saved his fortune and his faith in human goodness, she had shown the world that courage, intelligence, and moral clarity could triumph over even the most sophisticated forms of deception. "Sophie," Marcus said, putting his arm around her shoulders, "I want you to know that saving me from Eleanor's fraud was just the beginning of all the good you're going to do in this world. You've already changed laws, protected hundreds of children, and inspired thousands of people to stand up for what's right." Honest, Sophie leaned against her father's shoulder, feeling the deep contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. "Dad, do you remember what you told me that Christmas when I was sick with pneumonia? You said that sometimes the smallest people can make the biggest difference." Marcus smiled at the memory. "I had no idea I was talking to someone who would prove that point so dramatically." Well," Sophie said, with the confident smile of someone who had learned that the truth, however small or unexpected its source, was always more powerful than the most elaborate lies. "I guess we both learned that families aren't just about blood relationships or legal documents. They're about people who choose to believe in each other and fight for each other, no matter what." As they walked back toward the Capitol building, where a reception was being held to celebrate the passage of Sophie's legislation, Marcus knew that their story, which had begun with fraud and deception in a Denver courtroom, had become something much more profound, a testament to the power of truth, the importance of courage, and the unbreakable bonds that form when two people choose to build a family based on love, respect, and shared commitment to making the world a little bit better for the children who need protection most. The little girl's truth had not only saved a billionaire from financial ruin, it had created a legacy of justice that would protect countless other children for generations to come.